Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. Just need to let everybody know that the stream is going on. Okay, I'm going to get started. Tonight's topic is going to be about Marvel's woke New Warriors reboot and why Black creators need to control the Black image. Now, about 2 weeks ago, Marvel Comics announced its relaunch of Marvel's New Warriors. And as a part of Marvel's New Warriors, they have decided to introduce two new Black characters, Snowflake and Safe Space. And these two characters were basically racist caricatures designed to minimize and emasculate the image of the Black man, and they were designed to minimize and asexualize the image of the Black woman. Now, both of these characters, they were brought in for so-called diversity passively, but aggressively. It was about promoting racism because the creator of these characters, Daniel Kibblesmith, he allegedly had some issues with Night Thrasher, the original leader of the New Warriors, being strong and masculine and having power. And because he had issues with the idea of a heterosexual Black man having power, this is why he decided to create these two characters, Snowflake and Safe Space. So he basically wasn't trying to create characters that would bring actual diversity to Marvel Comics. What he wanted to do was create quote unquote safe characters that would allow him to feel comfortable about the smooth world he was creating. Because what he was looking to do with Snowflake and Safe Space was create a safe place for him to imagine the adventures of his superheroes and a place where he could feel comfortable about the world around him. So basically, he was not comfortable with the idea of an already established Black character like Dwayne Taylor, aka the Night Thrasher, a Black man who was a millionaire, a master martial artist, a very, very intelligent man, and a man, as I see it, basically as a teenage boy, was nearly on the level of Batman. So he basically was terrified about the idea of a Black man having that kind of power. So he sought to take away the Black man's power by creating this character, Safe Space, who would be somebody safe for him to feel comfortable about writing. And that shows me right there that if this is the kind of writer they're going to have at Marvel, it's clear to me that he's not qualified to work at Marvel, because if you aren't comfortable about the idea of creating a character who is black, that is somebody who is about fighting crime and taking on the bad guys, then you are not fit for duty to go out here and write comic books like the New Warriors, because the original New Warriors wasn't about so-called diversity as related to putting up people there just based on their skin tones. It was basically like the Teen Titans, a group of Marvel's younger heroes looking to make their mark in the superhero world. That's what I saw when I picked up the issue of Thor 411 and 412 back in 1989 when I was picking up the Acts of Vengeance storyline. I was in high school. The New Warriors were never meant to be this woke team. It was meant to be Marvel's answer to Teen Titans, which was one of the best-selling comics over at DC in pre-crisis, and one of its strongest sellers as related to its book at the time that was coming out, The New Titans. Titans was one of their stronger books, and Marvel wanted to reach that audience with the New Warriors. But what Marvel wants to do here with this New Warriors right now is they want to show the world how so aware they are and how they're all about diversity and inclusion. But when I take a critical examination of their so-called diversity and inclusion, it's all about promoting the same old racism. I'm glad to see you here, Chris Crazy House. Chris Crazy House, he's one of the guys, he does comics and art. I'm glad to see him here on this stream. But when I look at Marvel today, there's a lot of these so-called woke creators, they don't really see how racist they are. I didn't know that, he was a comedy writer. If he's a comedy writer, he's a bad comedy writer. To worm your way into comics, that just shows how weak a writer he is, because really good comedy writers, they're looking for another comedy script, and that shows me that he's not really good at comedy, and he really isn't really good at comics, because when I look at those characters he created, he really is not good at writing comics, because I know what he was trying to say between the lines about your snowflake and your safe space. I know the digs he was trying to make at Black people with those characters, because as someone who can read between the lines, I looked at both of those characters and I said, I know what you're trying to say about Black people with these characters. I know with Snowflake, what you're trying to say about Black women is you're trying to say that Black women are not sexually attractive, and you want to make this quote unquote non-binary character to express your insecurities about Black women and how uncomfortable you feel about Black women being sexy and attractive. Because it's clear to me that he has an issue with Black women being sexy and attractive, and he wants the white females to appear to be more attractive in comparison. This is something that has been done for over 50 years, not even 50 years, I say 100 years, because I can go back to 1934's Imitation of Life, and I remember watching some sequences of Claudette Colbert and the woman who was playing the Mammy character, and what they were trying to do there with those images was say that the white woman who was slim, feminine, and petite was considered to be sexually attractive. And then they took the image of the Black woman who was appearing to be big, burly, and masculine looking. And again, they were looking to passively try to make the Black female image appear to be less attractive. And what they wanted to do was make the white woman appear to be the ideal standard of beauty. So I saw what Kibblesmith was doing with Snowflake, because when I sat there and I watched Imitation of Life, I sat there and I saw that same type of imagery being presented with your snowflake. Now, I find it interesting that he couldn't create somebody like Storm, who is considered by many comic fans to be the pinnacle of beauty. I mean, when people look at Storm, they see incredible beauty. When they look at Misty Knight, they see incredible beauty. And when there are many black heroines that people like Vixen, where they see incredible black beauty, but he didn't want to do that. What he wanted to do was create this non-binary character, and this is the same pattern that they participated in again a while back with an issue of Supergirl, where I saw the same racism being perpetrated. Because I looked at it, I said, why is it always the black characters always being presented as this non-binary character? Why isn't it a white character or a Hispanic character or an Asian character? It's always a black character. And that always makes me believe that there is some sort of narrative being presented as related to the black image, because every time we get one of these alphabet characters, it's always a black character, never a white character, never an Asian character, never a Hispanic character. And I believe that is because they believe that black people are not going to push back as related to it, and they believe that the black community is weak. But what I'm finding is that there are a group of black comic fans out there who are willing to push back, and they're willing to stand up like I stand up against this, because this is, again, a dig at not only black women, but black men, because Safe Space is a a dig at black men, because what they want to say is that this black man who is dressed up in pink with pink hair and is looking effeminate, this is a safe black man. And this safe black man is one we feel comfortable about having in our story. Now, your Kibblesmith, as Chris Crazy House pointed out, he said that he was intimidated by the original New Warriors. So when I look at that, and especially how his statements about Night Thrasher, it shows me that this guy really is a racist. And because he is a racist as I see him, this is why we can't trust this guy or anybody at Marvel right now as related to the black image, because this Marvel today, filled with all of these far leftists, these what people call SJWs, these people, they think that they're all about diversity and tolerance. But when I look at the comics that they produce talking about diversity and tolerance, I see the same old white supremacy and racism that has been a major problem with the comic book industry for a while. And I don't see any of the integrity and character that I saw back in 1988 when I was reading Captain America on the regular. Now, back in 1988, they decided that Steve Rogers wasn't going to be the Captain America anymore, and they decided to introduce John Walker as Captain America, and they decided to introduce Lamar Hoskins as Bucky. And after a while of those stories, about 2-3 issues into those stories, there were some letters sent to Marvel from people in the public. And one of the letters told Mark Gruenwald, the writer at the time of Captain America, that the term Buck was offensive to black people. And the whole idea of Lamar Hoskins, Bucky at the time, the whole idea of this black man in a boy's costume and being bigger and taller than Captain America, the whole idea of him being this black Buck was really offensive. And Mark Gruenwald, on hearing about the Lamar Hoskins, the black Bucky, being offensive, he decided to change the character. So with Mark Gruenwald, when he heard about the whole Bucky situation, what he did was he acknowledged that he made a mistake in the letters section, and then later on in his run of Captain America, he decided to change Lamar Hoskins' character from this Bucky type sidekick into Battlestar. So when I look at what they did in 1988 on hearing about, okay, we've with this whole Bucky character who was really very offensive because you have a black man, a grown man, the same age as Captain America, being in a boy's costume, being bigger, and then being called Bucky. What they did was say, okay, we made this mistake. Now we are going to fix this mistake so that you're going to have this John Walker character, but you're going to have him with a partner who is on equal footing. So you had your Lamar Hoskins, who went from being Bucky to being Battlestar. And that's an acknowledgement of, one, a mistake you make as related to a racial issue, and then two, working to rectify that mistake and doing something to make it right. So when I looked at the Marvel of the 1980s, they were looking to really promote diversity in the pages of their comics. And with characters like Battlestar, they were looking to actually give us a really balanced character. Yeah, Chris, Battlestar was a way better character, and he was really underrated. They really did not use him enough in that run of Captain America. I mean, we got a couple of side stories here and there. I think he could have really actualized his potential, but they never really used him the way that they should have used him. I mean, later on in the storylines, they showed how he was being separated from John Walker because of what the Red Skull was doing. But then after that, he was just put on Silver Sable and the Wild Pack and then practically forgotten into obscurity. He was a very, very solid character. But when I look at how Mark Gruenwald handled that situation, that the way he handled it was with extreme professionalism. And he practically took responsibility that these creators at Marvel today, they aren't taking an effect. They're not taking responsibility and saying, okay, we made a mistake with these two characters, Snowflake and Safe Space, and we really need to take a look at ourselves and examine ourselves, because if we're creating characters like this, it shows that we have some sort of issue with Black people, and we are racist because we're sitting there talking about diversity, but the types of characters we're promoting as related to diversity, either they are tokens or they're passive aggressive digs at Black people and people of color. And yeah, Battlestar should have been on an Avengers team. He should have been, given a major push. And there were so many, great diverse characters at Marvel that never really got to actualize their potential. They were put out there, but they never really got to get that opportunity to shine. And that's one of the reasons why I say that we can't really trust people at places like Marvel Comics. And that's why we have to go out of our way to create our own characters and support those who create our own Black comic books, our own Black manga, and our own Black fantasy, because it's only in our own Black comic books, Black fantasy, and Black manga that we can see images of ourselves that show who we really are. Because when I pick up books like, Black Sands right here, you get to see strong images of Black men and Black women, and you get to see stories that show us with the power we have. I mean, we get to see, again, look at this image. You see strong Black men and Black boys and Black girls in this image of the Black Sands, which shows us the Egyptian gods as Black. And giving your kids this kind of stuff, it can really change their life. I mean, when you see images like this on the regular, it can make you look at yourself and see, yes, I am somebody, I have value. So that's why it's important for us to support, creators like the Black Sands creators, like the people who make Tuskegee Airs, which, again, here you see another image of Black boys and Black girls with strength and power. You see them, doing things. And these type of images, again, they can shape the way you see yourself. So, and then there's other comics I've picked up, like Chris's Omega Black. Again, all of these comics, these can shape the way you see yourself and the way you see the world. So it's very important for us to go out here and support Black creators, because they're the only ones out here who are looking to protect our image. They're the only ones looking out here to give us the best image of ourselves. And they're the only ones that are out here who understand how important it is for us to control our own narrative. I haven't read that Supremo. I haven't read Harlem Hellfighters. I would like to find out about it, but if I get a link to it, I'll take a look at it. But when the whole thing is, when we take control of our narrative, we get to tell our stories. So that's one of the most important things about us having these technology out here, like print-on-demand technology, like this digital technology, is we can use that tool to go out here and control our image. And when you have the money to control your media, then you can control the narrative as related to yourself, and you can control the picture of your own image. So that's why Black creators are important, because when we control the narrative, we get control over the story. And when we control the story, we don't have to be dictated to by racists like your Daniel Kibblesmith and many of these woke creators who sit there and have this very paternalistic view of Black people, thinking that if they include us in their world, they have accomplished something, when they haven't accomplished anything at all. You including me in your world isn't something I see as having value. Me creating my own world is more valuable to me as I see it. So when I go out here and I make a story like a John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose, this has value to me, because I am creating not only my own stories that feature my own characters, but I'm also creating a universe of characters like the SJS Direct universe, with stories like ISIS, the main event, and stories like Eve's Team Got Us Up. So I'm creating an entire world of Black characters and Black stories, and putting the Black image up at the forefront and showing you, again, not only a world of Black characters, but showing you diversity as related to that world, because we don't get diversity as related to the world of Black characters. In most cases, we only get a small narrative based on how many of these SJWs and far leftists see us, but their picture of us isn't really accurate as I see it, because they really have not even scratched the surface as related to Black culture. Usually, the only Black experience they know is that from their Black bootlicks, like, for example, with that self-made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. When I take a critical examination of that miniseries made by your Cassie Lemons, that miniseries really it was one of the worst things since that Harriet movie, and it really just made a mockery of Madam C.J. Walker, all while promoting all sorts of racist stereotypes. And again, this shows why it's important for us ADOS Black people to take control over our image, take control over our stories and take control over our narrative, because when we let others take control of our narrative, they want to create a safe space so that they can put their snowflake token characters in place and be able to promote their agendas that allow them to breathe brand new life into old stereotypes. But in our own stories, we get a balanced and humanized picture of Black people. We get a balanced and humanized picture of Black life. And we get to see a richer and more diverse picture of Black life, because in the hands of these Black comic creators, these Black sci-fi creators, these Black fantasy creators, we get to see that bigger and richer picture of the Black experience. And that picture allows us to really see Black life for what it truly is. And we have not really gotten that from your mainstream media. Usually what we get from the mainstream media are these watered down pictures of Black life. But when you go over to those Black creators, like I showed you just a minute ago, like with Chris Brown's Omega Black, here we have a manga that is, set in this far distant world. And this is something we usually don't get to see all the time in mainstream media. But with Black creators, we do get to see it. And we get to see that Black creators can create worlds on the same level as related to comics. When I look at comics from the Black creators, they're on the same level. When I look at Omega Black, it's on the same level as a Marvel or a DC comic. When I look at, Search for Sadiqa, it's very well crafted. I mean, this is a well crafted comic, and I was glad to go down to, the Schaumburg Black Book Festival to come pick this up. And when I look at books like your Tuskegee Heirs, I see, our history being presented in a positive light. I see them paying homage to our history and moving things forward. Because this manga, what I liked about it was we got to see the creators paying homage and showing respect to our ancestors, the Tuskegee Airmen, but then also taking things forward and giving us a manga which it really shows that we can create something on the same level of Robotech. So when we take control over our own image, when we tell our own stories, what that does is it shows how we can control our narrative and how we can tell our own stories, and they can be even better than many of these stories created by the mainstream media. So when we go out here and we tell our own stories, it should have a higher value because it's from us, coming from us. I don't know who did the artwork for those. I'd have to look inside. I'll just take a minute and take a look inside. For Tuskegee Heirs, I think this is Marcus Williams and Greg Burnham. They did the story. No, Marcus Williams did the art for Tuskegee Heirs. If I had a link to their thing, I would have put it in the stream, but he did the art for that. I think David Leonardman Manuel Godoy did the art for Black Sands. And this manga, again, it takes the Egyptian gods and shows you how they actually were, how they were Black people. And he does this is an amazing manga right here. But all of this, again, is brothers and sisters taking control over their own image. And again, we have to do that because you can't really trust the people at places at Marvel Comics because they don't have your best interests at heart. When I look at your mainstream comic book industry, I don't trust them anymore because there aren't people at places like Marvel, like the late Mark Gruenwald was back in the day, to own up, admit he did wrong, admit he made a mistake, take responsibility for his mistake, and then look to rectify that mistake by taking a character where he knew he made some mistakes with him initially, and then turning him into a strong image of a Black man, even though Marvel didn't really use Battlestar too much. he was a very positive image of a black man, showing us that you could have a hero on the same level as Captain America, and he could have the same power set, and he could be a positive image as a black man. That was something that when I was a kid growing up, I really liked seeing, because it was seeing Battlestar and Jim Rhodes. Those are the things that really got me buying Iron Man and Captain America, was seeing those two characters, especially Jim Rhodes, because Jim Rhodes, even though he didn't really put on the armor too much in that time I was in high school when the comic was out, he was always actively there, and he was a very positive character ever since his inception. So I really liked seeing those type of black characters, the balanced, humanized characters. But Marvel isn't really interested in creating those kinds of characters. What they want to do now is talk about how quote unquote woke they are and how so-called self-aware they are. Meanwhile, they're participating in the same racism that they use that these racists have been participating in for years, as related to our media. And instead of us sitting there and waiting for Marvel Comics to get a clue and get better as related to their racism, I see it as an opportunity for us to go out here and create our own stuff, support our own stuff, and take complete control over our own image. Because every person who goes out here and picks up a John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose, or an Isis, the main event, or an Esteem Goddess of, or an Isis, all that glitters, or a John Haynes Dark Succubus, you are helping a black creator like myself, and you're helping to further promote the black image, and images that will present the best image of black people. So I'm going to leave a link to John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. You can pick that one up on Amazon in paperback and Kindle format. And you can pick up the ISIS, the main event. It's available in paperback now. You can put it in a pre-order for the Kindle version. But every time you read those type of stories that present a positive image of black people and show you black people living, different lives, it can really shape the way you see yourself. It can shape the way you see the world, and it can shape your perceptions of the world. Because I remember, growing up as a kid with, again, characters like Jim Rhodes, characters like Battlestar, growing up with The Cosby Show, growing up with Benson, and all of those things really changed my perspective and made me see value in being black. And then in the 90s, when I started picking up books like the Milestone line, it really shaped everything about things as related to, how I wanted to do things, because I aspired to be a comic book writer for years, but I could never break into that industry. So that's why I went the novel route, and that's why I went to doing my books like John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose, in paperbacks. So I couldn't get into the comic book world. So I took my stories and I brought them over when print on demand came around, and I brought them over and created my own imprint, because it was always something I wanted to do ever since I was 17 years old, was continue creating those positive images, building on the legacy of guys like Bill Cosby and Robert Townsend and many others, because I understood how important it is. And I've heard from many of my readers out there. I mean, one of my readers, he says his son loves books like the John Haynes series, because it shows you that image of black manhood and black masculinity. And people like seeing these type of images because it shows you, the power of a black man, something we really don't get to see on the regular at places like your Marvel Comics, where they want to give you an effeminate character like a Safe Space, or a neutered character like the Ta-Nehisi Coates Black Panther. They really want to give you these kind of neutered, effeminized, black men, but they don't want to give you images of black men that show images of a black man having power and strength, like the images of John Haynes, and all the John Hardaway. But they don't really like putting images like this, like this variant I did with Josh Howard, showing the black man and the black woman standing together. They don't really like images like this in their comics, it seems. So whenever they have black characters, they don't like showing you, images of black people being strong, black people being powerful. And what they do is they neuter and emasculate their characters. But in our own media, like I'm producing right here on the SJS Direct imprint, and many of the books I have supported, I can see those images. And that's why it's important for us to have these black comic creators, these black sci-fi creators, these black fantasy creators, these black manga creators, because when we have our own people out here telling our stories, they can give us a narrative that gives us the truth about black people. They can give us the truth about black culture. They can give us the truth about the black experience. And those characters are at the forefront, because if you look at this image, John Haynes is at the forefront. If you look at this image, Isis is at the forefront. Even though she's getting beaten up, she's still at the forefront. And if you look at this image, Eastine is front and center, even though she's facing off. So the characters on our books, they are front and center, and they're not background characters. They are up at the front, and they are front and center presenting our stories. What's going on, Turtle Sage? Glad to see you here. And that's important for us to have in our comics and our literature. We need to have our characters, up front, and we need to have our characters presented up front, because we're not going to get that at places like Marvel Comics, where they talk about diversity. But when I look at the comic book industry and I take a critical examination of that comic book industry, I'm not seeing many faces of people like myself writing the stories, and I'm not seeing many brothers and sisters in the art department. So that's an issue I have with your Marvel Comics. They're sitting there talking about so-called diversity as related to creating this new Warriors with this Daniel Kibblesmith, this white racist, but I don't see no black people. They'll sit there and talk about, oh, we're so diverse because we've got Sana Amanat, a Middle Eastern woman, as their vice president of content and character development. But I don't see no black faces as writers. I don't see no black faces as artists. And they'll come to me and they might trot out a token like a Todd Nahishi Coates, but I'm not seeing any sort of qualified writers out there or qualified artists, because I know I've met people at many of these cons and shows, and I'm seeing such great talent out here, but I don't see any of that talent getting work at Marvel, and I don't see it getting regular work at Marvel. So they talk about all of this so-called diversity, but I'm not seeing that diversity collecting a paycheck and being able to have any economic power. So when I look at that situation, I'm saying you're talking about diversity, but when it comes down to the economics, you're not looking to hire any black talent, and you're not looking to put some money in a black creator's pocket. The reason why you don't want to do that is because if you go out here and put money in that black creator's pocket, what's going to happen is that black creator is going to have economic power. And that's the thing that many of these racists really fear, is a black creator having economic power and then possibly taking that economic power to go out here and build their own comic company, the same way your Jim Lee, your Rob Liefeld, and your Todd McFarlane built Image Comics, and taking their own intellectual properties and then creating their own company to go out here and be able to create their own comics. So they really fear the whole idea of a Black creator coming out here. That's why they don't want to hire Black creators, because if they get that economic power, they're going to really use that economic power to take control over the Black image. And once they take control over the Black image, that's going to be a wrap in some cases. And the reason why it's going to be a wrap in some cases is because when you have the Black creators and you have this momentum that I'm seeing, because I have not seen, the momentum like this. And I've been around for a good 25, 30 years of collecting comics. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 4 years old. But these days, when I go to places like the Schomburg's Black Comic Book Festival, I'm seeing throngs of kids going out here and they're picking up books like Black Sands. They're going out here picking up books like Tuskegee Heirs. They're going out here, picking up Search for Sadiqas. They're picking up these kind of books and they're reading them and they're getting excited about those books. And I haven't seen that, again, in over 30 years of being in this hobby. I have not seen Black kids, looking at their own image and saying, I want to pick up my own image. And that's what they fear, that if we hire these Black creators, they're going to take the money they do these Marvel comics with and then take that money to fund their own creations and then do things like start their own image type company. And once that happens, we get more and more control over the Black image. So this is something a lot of these people at places like Marvel are afraid of, and that's why they want to have their safe space with their safe space characters, because they fear that if Black empowerment comes, they're going to be really out of a job. And what they want to do is, again, control that Black narrative and that Black image. And we have to take control over that, because it's clear, again, we can't trust them, because when I looked at Snowflake and Safe Space, I saw the same type of racist imagery I used to watch in things like Amos and Andy shows, movies like Imitation of Life. And there's these so-called people who are about diversity and inclusion. They are all about the same racism and exclusion, and they're all about showing us these weakened images because they want us to be a part of their world and an insignificant part of their world, but they don't want us to see our value as Black people. But when we go out here and we pick up our own stories and our own books, we do see our value, we do see our worth, and we see, again, that broader, richer picture. Because, again, when I look at comics like this, we get ancient Egypt from the Black perspective, and we get something, again, on the same level as the best mangas from Japan, and it's just beautiful art. I mean, when I look at Black Sands, it's on the level of anime. I mean, this issue right here, this fifth issue, this was like looking at anime, in the pictures. Just very spectacular work, and we're not going to get that from company like Marvel Comics or DC Comics, where you're just going to be in their background. And why should you be in their background? I mean, all this technology is here for us to create our own worlds, our own spaces, and create our own stuff. I mean, that's what I do with the SJS Direct imprint. I make my own stuff because I look at these stories featuring Black characters, and I see that they're not going to give us, again, strong images of Black masculinity or images of Black femininity, because oftentimes when it comes down to Black women, we don't get to see any images of Black femininity. That's why I wanted to do this character, this Eastine cover, because we oftentimes don't get Black femininity. And I do it with the Isis character as well. We don't get Black femininity. We get them trying to find ways to make the white characters appear more attractive in comparison. So when I look at the so-called woke people and all of the ideas that they have, I just see the same old racism repackaged in a brand new box. And I'm not, and as somebody who, again, grew up with comics, I don't really want to keep buying the same old racism, the same old tokenism. I don't want to be the token in read about the token in somebody's world. I want to see us being the center of our own world and us telling our stories in our world and us controlling the stories in our world and us controlling the narrative of our world. Because as I've said in numerous videos, those who control the money control the media. Those who control the media control the narrative. And these black comic creators, these black sci-fi creators, these black fantasy creators like myself, we are trying to control the narrative because we know how important it is to control the narrative. Because when you control the narrative as related to your story, you are ensuring that your story is being told accurately, and you are ensuring that your story is being shared to an audience. Moreover, when you control the narrative, you can control how we see ourselves. And when we control how we see ourselves, what happens is we can shape the way an entire generation sees itself. For example, when I look at the legacy of Bill Cosby, what he did with the Cosby Show, he shaped the way an entire generation of black people saw themselves. Because before that, all we used to get in the 70s and stuff was Good Times, your What's Happening. And they would present us with these jive time ideas that came from white people. But when Bill Cosby came up, we started to see images of professional black men, professional black women, good kids who were just looking to live their lives. And we got to see that picture of black life that people in mainstream media didn't want us to see. All they wanted us to see primarily was the streets, the hood. And in the late 80s, we really got to start to see the picture of black life starting to really balance out. But right around the time of the NWA, we started to see a shift from that balance. And what happened was we got the hood movies, we got the ghetto movies, and we got this slow turn back. And then around 2001 with Halle Berry and Monsters Ball, we saw a complete, 360 back to the stereotypes. And we're seeing this again, sadly, the same thing with the comics. You have these woke people going out here talking about they're about representation, but you don't see any black people working at the company. So when I look at a lot, again, these woke SJW comic pros, they'll talk about diversity, inclusion, but when you start looking at their payroll and you start looking at their personnel, you start seeing, oh, wait a minute, there's no black people working here except for maybe one of these black bootlicks like a Ta-Nehisi Coates or one of these token creators, but there's no real black representation where we're getting, 4 or 5 black people who are actively out here doing things like going to the black cons, going out here supporting black owned businesses, or looking to tell stories and talk about things, or looking to do things like participate in group economics. Because to me, you just having some black skin, that's just not enough for me as I see it. Because having a black face there, that's what the woke people want to do, to talk about inclusion. But the whole thing is, what type of black person is there working at a Marvel? What type of black person is working at a DC? What type of values do they have? Are they interested in bringing other brothers and sisters on? Are they looking to get some other black artists some work? Because I know so many black artists out here, really talented guys out here, like Mike Williams, really talented, puts together a masterpiece of a cover. I mean, I've had people tell me that they sit there and they study this cover because it just has so much nuance and just tells such a great story. I mean, Mike should be working at a place like a Marvel or a DC, and I look at the art that in places things like your New Warriors, and the art is horrible. Meanwhile, you have a master artist like Mike Williams, and they're not even thinking about contacting him. And there are many Black artists they're not thinking about contacting. And they're talking about, again, diversity and inclusion, but the talent is out here is not being included. And again, this is why we have to go out here and have our own Black publications and our own Black media, because that's the only place where our creators can go out here and actualize their potential. Because talented Black artists, this is the only places like SJS Director, the only place where they can get a chance to put together, again, Mike can put together a masterpiece cover like he did for John Haynes' The Man with Nothing to Lose, and have it shown to the world, because people like Marvel, they're not looking to do that. They're not looking to hire, great talent like Mike, and they're not looking to go out here and hire many of the great indie creators out here who are putting together, great work like Black Sands, great work like Tuskegee Airs, great work like Search for Siddiqa. They're not looking to hire this talent. And if they're not looking to hire our best talent, then we need to put ourselves to work, because the work we're going to do for ourselves is far more important than, as I see it, working for Marvel Comics, because the work we do for ourselves is not just us going out here and just publishing comics. It's about us taking that control over our image. It's about us taking control over our stories. And it is about us taking power by saying that when we create this narrative, it's going to be about us, and it's going to be about us telling our stories and sharing our stories for our own audience. And that's the thing that, as I see it, is the most important thing about us going out here. Because again, when I looked at New Warriors, I said to myself, we can't trust their publications. We can't trust their stories, because if they're going to go out here and give you a snowflake and a safe space and tell you that's a hero, and then he's going to go on and talk about how he's scared of the New Warriors and talk about how he's scared of Night Thrasher, and what he's really scared of is not the New Warriors or Night Thrasher. What he's really scared of is the image of heterosexual Black masculinity, the image of heterosexual Black manhood, and the image of a heterosexual Black man being a leader and an authority figure. That's what Daniel Kibblesmith is really scared of, because when he sees an image of a Black man like a John Haynes or an image of a Night Thrasher, it makes him feel insecure and inadequate about himself. And it makes him scared, because when he is confronted by a Black man like me, then he knows he cannot run these so-called diversity games on the world. Because when he runs into a heterosexual, masculine Black man like myself and talks about a safe space character, he knows that a Black man like myself is going to call him out, and a Black man like myself is going to let him know what type of racist he actually is. And that's one of the reasons why they don't really want Black creators like myself working at places like Marvel Comics or DC Comics or anybody in the comic book industry. It's because they know when you have a heterosexual Black man there who is secure in his manhood, secure in his masculinity, secure in his male identity, he is going to call out a lot of these types of racist characters and caricatures, and he's going to call out these narratives as related to so-called diversity and so-called inclusion, because he knows It's not about including real Black people or the real Black experience. It's all about including people who fit a certain narrative that allow them to have a smooth world. But as I see it, why would I want to be a part of their smooth world where I'm their token when I can be my own man in my own world, and I can be a man and have value as a man in my own world? That's the way I see things when I create stories. Is I say, why would I want to be, a token character in a token comic when I can be the hero in my own? Why should a Black man again be this second banana when he can be the lead fruit? And why should a Black woman be a background character to some white female when she can be the lead heroine and be carrying her own stories? And that's something I am really passionate about bringing, because when I go out here and I create characters like Isis, or John Haynes, or Easteen, or Matilda Crowley, I want us to see Black culture and the Black experience at the forefront. I want us to see Black life at the forefront. I want us to see balanced pictures of Black life at the forefront. And I want people to come out of that experience learning that about Black people, Black culture, the Black experience, coming out of it with a story that really takes you into Black life and really shows you what it really is. I want to show you that picture. And you're not going to get that picture from this old legacy Black media or these legacy Black creators. In new Black media, you're going to get those pictures and you're going to get those images. So that's why it's important for us to have all of these brothers and sisters out here creating Black comics, Black science fiction, Black fantasy, Black manga. And it's important for us to go out here and support that work, because all of those brothers and sisters, they are out here, they're making these stories because they love them, but they're also making them because they love other Black people. And because they love other Black people, they want to give us an image of ourselves that shows us showing how valuable we are and shows us having the power that we are oftentimes denied in mainstream media. For example, I remember when Professor Black Truth was talking about Raising Dion, the Netflix series, and he was talking about how every image in that story was all about showing how the Black boy having power was something that they said was a negative. And I remember listening to him and thinking about a lot of the stories I do, and I said, yeah, he's right, that mainstream media, they don't like seeing those images of Black boys taking power, Black men taking power, because the man, as part of God's natural order, is the head of household, the leader, the authority figure, and they don't like the idea of a boy taking that kind of power, and they don't like the idea of a Black man having that kind of power, because they know that if he had that kind of power, they couldn't control him. And that was one of the reasons why I believe Netflix wanted to cancel Luke Cage. And even in season 2, as masterfully done as season 2 was, they were always alluding to the idea of Luke Cage having that power as something evil. And that was something that it really rubbed me the wrong way on Luke Cage as related to season 2, was you had Iron Fist talking about, oh, if you take this power, you're going to be dark and evil. And it's like, I saw what they were trying to say about a Black man taking power and asserting his leadership and authority. And that's something that I see, again, with a lot of these media out here. They don't really like the idea of you seeing this idea of a Black man having power as something good. So when I was looking at Luke Cage season 2 in the finale, one of the things, again, that irked me was him and having power was seen as a negative. But as I saw it, it was an extremely positive thing, because he was taking power over his neighborhood. He was taking power over his community. And that image of that black man wearing a suit and a tie, that was the ultimate image of power. And your Luke Cage went from a street hero to a power man. And your Chio Hodari Coker, he was brilliant in his imagery with him becoming the power man in that black and gold suit, shirt, and tie. I mean, that was vivid and powerful imagery right there. And they don't like those type of images showing you that type of image of a black man having that kind of power. And that, when I saw what they were trying to do, with the Raising Beyond, Professor Black Truth was talking about it, it really took me back to what I was trying to do with the Temptation of John Haynes. Now, the Temptation of John Haynes, I had the same type of imagery going on with John Haynes wearing the suit and the tie, and then later on in the story, he starts to take the power, because later on, after he's racially profiled in a supermarket, he then puts on the suit and the tie, and he starts to take the power, and he starts to take the power away from the white racists at the company. And that was a scene in Temptation of John Haynes. If you ever get a chance to read it, it'll show you, the black man taking power and people getting scared of the whole idea of the black man taking power. So that's something that you're not going to they really want to try to get rid of as related to the black image. So I'm going to leave a link to but the whole thing is they always try to connotate it with power being evil and a black man taking power as associated with being evil. When a black man taking power, there is nothing evil about a black man taking power and control. What he's doing is he's taking control because he knows what's best for his community. He knows what's best for people, and he knows what's best for the people because he's sitting there living with the people, communicating with the people every day, and he doesn't want to take crumbs from people's tables. He doesn't want to take leftovers. What he wants to do is be able to meet people's needs and meet them in an effective manner. And that's the thing that they really fear about Black people taking power, but we have to start taking power. And again, one of the ways we take power is by going out here and supporting Black creators like myself and many of the brothers and sisters whose comics I have shown in this live stream. I wish I could buy more brothers and sisters comics. I mean, I have supported other brothers and sisters Kickstarters out here. I bought their digitals. And I always, again, if I see a Black comic, I will put a pledge in for it because I understand what the bigger picture is as related to the Black image, because every image that we see out here from a Black creator, what that does is it creates a richer picture of the Black experience. It creates a richer picture of Black culture, and it allows people to see a narrative that is counter to the mainstream narrative. So each of those works that Black creators are putting out there, whether they be Black manga creators, Black sci-fi creators, Black fantasy, they each chip away at many of these false narratives, because here we have Black men and Black women being the face of their own media, Black men and Black women being the face of their own stories, and Black creators being the face of their own work and saying, hey, my work is out here, my work has value. And when you see, again, throngs of people like I saw at that Black Comic Book Festival, and even when Chris Brown invited me to Anime NYC, I saw a lot of Black kids. They're picking up our stories and they're supporting our stories and our work. And again, that's why we need our stories out there, because this is about shaping the minds of the next generation and building on the legacy of people like your Bill Cosbys, like your Robert Townsends, and many others, us building on those legacies and continuing to shape those young minds, because when it comes down to white supremacy, what they want to do is they want to promote these images of effeminized black men, emasculated black men, weak black men, like in Black Panther, where they showed us black men completely dominated by women. Characters like Safe Space would show us a black man with no sort of masculinity whatsoever, and characters like your Snowflake, which have no black femininity. When we have our own media, we can control those narratives, and we can have something to counter these false narratives that the mainstream media wants to promote regarding our image. Because what they want to do is they want to promote these images out here of these effeminized, asexualized, and neutered characters, because they don't want the idea of promoting a image of a sexualized black man or a sexualized black woman. Because what happens is people look at those images, they look at black men and black women in relationships. They look at, an image like this one on John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, of a black man and a black woman together. And that makes them start thinking about things like a black family. And that starts making them think about things like having that black family and having a mother and a father. And that's something that scares a lot of people. And that's one of the reasons why we got things like Luke Cage with Jessica Jones and him having a biracial baby, because what they wanted to do there was, oh, we're going to put Luke Cage with this white woman. And then once they did that, passively, yeah, they gave him a relationship, but aggressively, they neutered Luke Cage and basically turned him from a strong masculine black man in the comics into this complete beta male. But when I look at the Luke Cage show, they went in a complete different direction, which again upset many of those people, because they wanted to see that beta male Luke Cage, and that's probably what they're going to probably try to give us when they bring him back in the MCU. But they don't like the idea of that masculine Luke Cage being the head of the community, being the power man. And that's why they had to cancel the show and then try to call themselves moving the characters around, because they want to give us the one that's featured in Jessica Jones, this emasculated, neutered beta male who cannot even find the right cereal for his own daughter. That's how bad, those Jessica Jones comics are with Luke Cage. And they don't want you to see, again, that power man, that head of household, that father. And that's the ultimate image they're really terrified of, is that image of a black father who is a head of household, who is running his household, who has his wife at his side, has his wife, working at his side, and has his family together. That's an image that terrifies a lot of these people out here, because when you have a community of black people with black fathers in the home, you have a black economy you can't control. And when you have black people reading their own stories, reading stuff with their own image, you cannot push these narratives onto us, nor can you push those stereotypes onto us. And you can't have us acting like coons and buffoons, because when we have our own black media, like our own black comics, our own black manga, our own black science fiction, our own black fantasy, we are controlling the narrative. So we are not listening to your stories. We're not buying into these false narratives like this thug culture or this gangster culture. We're becoming our own black people. And again, this is why reading our media is so important. And that's true, Ray. The Nick Fury, Falcon, and War Machine, yeah, they never had a relationship because they were background characters. Again, when we control the stories, we can create relationships, but they don't want us to create relationships because they don't want to promote the idea of black love. For example, that's why they put Luke Cage with Jessica Jones in the comics, because the whole idea of promoting the idea of a black man loving a black woman, that's not a narrative mainstream media likes to promote as related to the black image. They're not going to give you a John Haynes and an Eastine together the way I did in the John Haynes series and the temptation of John Haynes and stories like Eastine, The Sands of Time, because showing a picture of a black man standing at the side of a black woman or a black man loving a black woman, that really runs counter to their narrative. And that's why we don't get to see characters like Nick Fury, Falcon, War Machine, Monica Rambeau ever being in a relationship with another black character, because that image, it does not fit their narrative. Their narrative is, if you have a black character like Storm, she has to be passed around to all of the white guys. And if you have a guy like Static, he's chasing after the white girl. So we don't really get to see the whole idea of black men and black women sharing love with each other, having a romance with each other, having intimate moments with each other. Because if you grow up seeing images of black love and seeing relationships between black men and black women, guess what? It's going to change the way you see yourself. Because with a lot of this media out here, what they want to show you is stuff like Waiting to Exhale. They want to show you the black man not being able to take care of his family, or he's a no good black man. And they want to show you, like Waiting to Exhale, they always show you the black man not want to, who's no good, or the black woman who can't find a good man. And when, again, we don't need to buy into those narratives, because that's what these mainstream publishers want us to see, because they want to see us being failures. That's why they publish books like Waiting to Exhale, because it fits their narrative, because they want the white girl to be out here and have the successful relationship. They don't want us to see the black girl having the successful relationship or the successful romance. And I didn't really understand that until Coach Red Pill talked about, the publishing industry. For years, I thought it was just, they were just basic rejections. But then I started to see how these white women control the publishing industry, and how they only want to see certain narratives as related to black people. And they don't want us to see black men and black women having successful relationships, because if you have a black man and a black woman having a successful relationship and showing them standing together like this on the John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose cover, what it is it makes a lot of those white women angry. It makes a lot of these white women jealous, and they don't like certain images of black women. That's another thing that people need to understand about the so-called woke white females, is a lot of these same white women, they have an issue with slender, attractive black women. I mean, that's why they always go out of their way to give you an image of an obese woman, like a trailblazer on New Warriors, because they don't want you to see a black woman or one of these non-black women as attractive. They might let you see an Asian woman as attractive here or there, but they don't really want you to see a black woman primarily as this extremely attractive image, because that really makes them angry. So that's an issue that I've seen, again, throughout my life. I've had family members see that same issue, because when you're a slender, attractive black woman, they want to give you the same grief, these white women. But that's not really talked about. And that's a kind of a story that I think I should write, because, that's a story that we're not really seeing out here. But again, when we control our narrative, we can tell those kinds of stories, because mainstream media isn't going to talk about how our slender, in shape, and healthy sisters, they get grief on both sides as related to some of these morbidly obese black women who have bought into the stereotypes, and how some of these white women, they get jealous of the slender, in shape, fit sisters. They don't, again, that's a story that nobody wants to tell, but those are the type of stories I tell on places like the SJS Direct Imprint. I tell those type of stories because, again, I understand that in our media, it's important for us to tell our stories. And it's important for us to do that because when we control our narrative, you know, we are the ones in charge of it, and we are the ones taking that power away from these racists. We're taking away power from these white supremacists, and we're taking that power and we're using that power to empower a lot of these young brothers and sisters out here. And when they read these type of stories and they see these type of images, it really has an impact on their life long term. Because I remember being a kid and growing up with these type of images and these type of stories, and it practically changed the way I saw myself. Instead of me seeing, you can be at the bottom of the world, I started to see value in myself, and I started to see value in being Black, and I started seeing value in the Black culture and Black experience. And that's what made me so dedicated to building again on that work that people like Robert Townsend, Bill Cosby, the Hudlin brothers, and many others did out here, and doing things to further diversify, the Black image, so that you can get to see those aspects of Black life nobody really wants to talk about, like the Black goth subculture, like I did with the Spinsterella trilogy, things like Black sororities, like I did with the Thetas, and books like I'm doing right now with the fantasy I'm doing, because that fantasy, as I saw it, was very important. Because when our brothers and sisters, when we go out here and we escape, we shouldn't see a world of white people through a white lens. We need to see ourselves in those lead roles, and we need to see ourselves taking power. Because when you go out here and you pick up a Black comic book, a Black manga, or a fantasy book, what happens is you start to see yourself in that lead role, the same way I used to see Ben Sisko on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now, that was a show that really meant a lot to me, because here was a Black man who was in charge of the space station. He was in charge of the USS Defiant, and he was also a father. And I really liked seeing him in all of those roles. I mean, Ben Sisko, he was a very strong Black male in overall running his household, running his family, running that space station. That was one of the greatest Star Trek series that I ever experienced. I was glad to be able to experience watching it first run in syndication, because here we had a Black man with power, and that's something that I grew up with again on the regular ever since the days of the Cosby Show. But I think it's time that we started moving away from these mainstream platforms and start building our own platforms, because we go out here and we have the tools, we have the resources. So we need to go out here and build our own platform, because the thing is, we can't trust these mainstream platforms anymore. I mean, if they're hiring guys like this Daniel Kibblesmith, who says he's about comedy, I don't see anything to laugh at. And if this is him being serious, then he seriously doesn't understand the racism he has presented there. So it's not only just your Daniel Kibblesmith, it is also the culture that created your Daniel Kibblesmith. It is the culture that supports a Daniel Kibblesmith at Marvel that I can no longer trust. And this is why we need to go out here and create our own Black media, because we can't trust their media to represent us and our image. We have to go out here and create our own and support our own. And that's something we have to do, because we can't expect Hollywood to make our stories. We've got to make our own stories. Thank you, NeoStar Productions. Yeah, we got to make our own stories. And our own stories, as I see it, are far better than anything these woke people can produce. Because when these woke people go out here, all they do is give us the same old racism that their grandfathers and great grandfathers gave us. Because their grandfathers and great grandfathers, when they went out here and made these coon caricatures They made these mammies, these sambos, these sapphires. What they were doing was they were looking to laugh at us, make a mockery of us, and disrespect us. And what's sad is there are some people in our community who don't see how they're being disrespected. Now, again, I was on one of these Facebook groups and I had posted the video talking about why we needed our own creators. And one of these black nerds or somebody got mad at it, and the moderators took that post down in that State of Black Science Fiction Facebook group. And I was really sad about that because that wasn't hate speech telling black people to go have our own creators. And for us, it's important for us to have our own creators. What I was doing was pointing out that racism that this Kibblesmith was doing. And sadly, those moderators thought that that was hate speech. And again, siding with the racist, not understanding. You don't side with a racist and you don't side with somebody who supports racism that's against you. Because if it wasn't for those black creators, we wouldn't have the images to counter those narratives, and people like Kibblesmith would be able to continue on getting a pass. And what's sad is you got these people, these black folks who are a part of a certain group. They don't even understand how they're being used as useful idiots and by racists like a Daniel Kibblesmith and a buffer group to continue perpetuating racism in places like Marvel Comics. And they don't understand that when you go out here and you have guys like me who are speaking out against them, you try to push us out, you're actually hurting yourself, because these characters, again, like Snowflake and Safe Space, they're not about including us for the right reasons. It's all about putting up that smokescreen so that they can continue perpetuating the same racist stereotypes that they've continued to perpetuate. And that's what they want to do. They want to use Snowflake and Safe Space, thank you, Patrick Smith, as, again, a push of those same Amos and Andy images, those coon images, those minstrel images. And if you sit there and defend that stuff, then I have to say that there's something seriously wrong with you. Because I mean, there are people all over the world who I've seen who have come out against this, New Warriors. But I say the best way we black people can come out against your New Warriors is not by taking our money and looking for another Marvel comic to buy. I say, take your money and pick up some of these comics, like your Search for Sadiqas, your Tuskegee Heirs, your Black Sands, or pick up some of the books of the SJS Direct imprint, like the John Haynes series, like the ISIS series, like the E-Steam series. I mean, pick up some of these books and support a black creator who is looking out for your best interest. I mean, put some dollars in some of these brothers and sisters' hands, because if Marvel doesn't value you as a customer, then they don't deserve your black dollar. As I see it, if they don't want your black dollar, then you can take your black dollar and spend it with one of these brothers out here or these sisters out here who is putting in that work every day, like I do, making these videos, making these live streams, writing these stories. I mean, there are brothers out here putting in work, and you guys, you have to support the work. I mean, people are putting hours in looking to create positive stories about Black culture, the Black experience, diversify these stories, and we need that support because, again, if your Marvel doesn't appreciate the black dollar, then we need to take that black dollar and spend it with those in our community who want to elevate our image and want to empower us. We need to take our black dollars and spend it with those black people, because if Marvel does not respect the black dollar, then Marvel and all of these other comic companies, they don't deserve the black dollar as I see it. So they want to sit there and create a safe space for themselves. Well, we can make that safe space go broke, because we're not going to take our money and allow ourselves to be disrespected by at their expense. So we can take our money and support one of these brothers out here or one of these sisters out here who is putting in that work towards creating that positive image of Black culture, that positive image of Black life, that balanced picture of Black life. We can take our dollars and use it to take power. And we can read stories about people who want to get present an image of us taking power, because that's what the superheroes and comics are all about. It's about people learning how to take power in a situation. And the greatest power we can take is power over ourselves economically by saying, hey, we're not going to buy these woke comics. No, we're going to take our money and buy some work for some Black creators, because those Black creators, they are out here telling stories about me and they're telling stories about my life. And I'd rather spend money going down to a show like the Schaumburg Black Comic Book Festival and meeting up with other Black creators to pick up their work rather than spend my money on somebody at Marvel's work. Because as I see it, why should I spend money on a racist white man who disrespects me when I can spend money on a brother's work who is looking to give me the very best picture of myself, the very best stories about myself, and wants to present me with pictures of my life and my experiences I don't get to see in other forms of media. I'd rather spend a Black dollar on my own people, and I'd rather spend Black dollars on making an effort towards changing the Black image, controlling the Black image, and controlling the Black narrative. And when I look at the work of all of these Black comic creators, these Black sci-fi creators, these Black manga creators, I always make an effort to try to reach out to those creators and buy and support their work, because I know from my own business, it takes a lot of hours to put these stories together. It takes a lot of effort to put those stories together. And I know how much work goes into it. So I want to show support to all of those creators whenever I can, whether it be a pledge on a Kickstarter or going down to a show to buy their work, because I would rather put dollars in those brothers and sisters' pockets rather than spend it on a narrative that runs negative about me. Because every dollar I spend on a brother and sister, that's going to be a positive for us, and it's going to put not only money in that brother's pocket, but it's also going to encourage those brothers and sisters out here to continue on making more stories about us that present us in a positive image. And more of those stories, they're going to be able to have incentive to go out here and produce more work and be able to do more things like cons, do more things like shows, do more things like other forms of media and other platforms. So I understand how important it is for us to go out here and support Black creators, because every creation we support, that takes money away from white supremacist narratives, and it puts money towards empowering our own narrative and our own media. So when I look at the big picture, again, those who control the money control the media, and those who control the media control the narrative. That's why it's important to take a Black dollar and put it on Black media, so that those people who are creating that media can not only make that media, they can start taking control over the narrative as related to the Black image. And Black fantasy, science fiction, and manga is important to that narrative, because while it is an escape, it also inspires young Black children and those who read it to imagine a world where you see Black people taking power, where you see Black people taking control, where you see Black people in the lead, where you see Black people doing things and running things, and you see Black people as somebody important, because when you see yourself as important, you start to see yourself as having value. When you start to see yourself as having value, you start to see yourself as somebody lovable, and you start to promote values and things like Black love, Black on Black love, and you start to promote positive energy about yourself. And that's the importance of watching and reading Black media that presents the best image of ourselves. So I really appreciate all the work that Black creators do. And that's why they're so important these days, because I remember being a kid back in the day where the only images we had was Black media created by white comic creators. But we live in a great era where we have Black media created by new Black media from Black creators, and they have an important role in building and maintaining the Black image, and a great responsibility in creating maintaining the Black image. And I hope they understand. Thank you, Jamaica number one. I'm glad that the work from home video helped you. I wanted to really help a lot of people with that video working from home, because I work from home all the time, and I know how stressful it can be when it's a major adjustment, but I wanted to do that one to help people. So I'm glad that video could help you. But with our Black media, we have the power to, again, change our own image, and we have the power to change the image of Black people, not only for this generation, but for the next one as well. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And if you want to see me make more streams like this, you can donate to the Patreon by clicking the link in the chat. So there's a link to my Patreon if you want to donate there, or you could donate to the Cash App. And I use all that money that I get from the Patreon and the Cash App to pay artists like Mike Williams to do covers for John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. This cover was paid for by your donations. Covers like Bill Walko's ISIS, The Main Event. This was paid for with your donations. And covers like Josh Howard's John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose variant. All of these books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read these 2020 SJS Direct catalog books for free. And if you want to pick up the 2019 books like Esteem, Goddess of, John Haynes, Dark Succubus, and Isis, All That Glitters, you can pick up all of these books on Amazon as well. They're all available in paperback and Kindle formats. I'm working on something as related to the new Esteem book. I don't have a copy of it right now because I'm still waiting for the art to come in for it. But I have something fun, surprise planned for the new Esteem book. But until then, you can pick up Isis, The Main Event. And you can this is coming out on Kindle on April 6th. You can put in your pre-order for it. And this is where the Goddess Next Door steps in the square circle. It's all about wrestling. I'm going to be talking about this one more later in the upcoming week or so, because it's getting ready to launch. But you can pick up John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose right now. This is the first book of the SJS Direct 2020 catalog. You can pick up the Josh Howard variant or the Mike Williams regular. And thank you again, Jamaica number one, for the Cash App. I really appreciate it. And I really want to get the sales up on these books, because everybody who picks up these books, everyone that picks up these books, it really helps with promoting the Black image, changing the Black image, and changing the narrative as related to the Black image. So I really hope you head over to Amazon and pick up one of the books in the John Haynes series, or the Isis series, or the Esteem series, or one of the books like The Temptation of John Haynes and the Spinsterella trilogy. And I hope you pick them up, because, again, if we don't create our own stories and support our own stories, no one else will. And I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. And I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. I'm still wondering what the topic is going to be. but there will be a stream coming next week. I want to thank you again, and I want to wish everybody a good night.